Some things in this world are so foul, so twisted, they make a good man wonder why the Almighty ever allowed certain souls to draw breath. It was the summer of 1893, out past Raven Mesa, Arizona, where the sky sagged low and the heat pressed down like an iron lid on a pot. The desert breathed dust, clinging to the skin, stinging the eyes. Even the jackrabbits stayed under brush, and the lizards hugged the shadows. Nothing stirred. Nothing dared. Except one man, Elias Mercer. He was out looking for a fight. Elias had been on his way back from Coyote Bend, where he detraded salt, cartridges, and a half-broke mule for lamp oil and tobacco. A solitary man, the type who spoke little but remembered everything, the sort whose silence carried weight, and whose eyes had seen more than most men could bear. As he guided his sorrel horse down a narrow canyon trail, he spotted something strange under the crooked arms of a pinon tree. At first glance, it looked like a heap of rags snagged in the brush, but the closer he rode, the more he saw pale skin against the dirt. His chest went still. It was cloth. It was a person, a girl, barely 20, maybe younger. She lay crumpled in the dust, wrapped in a filthy, shredded blanket that clung to her bones. Her legs were raw with scratches, her lips cracked and bleeding from thirst. Her dark hair stuck to her face in matted clumps, streaked with dirt and blood. Her eyes, though those were worse than the wounds, they were empty. When Elias slid from his saddle, did he flinch, did he recoil, did he beg? Her voice came out low, hoarse, and broken like wind scraping over gravel. I am dirty, inside and out. Elias didn't ask what she meant. He didn't need to. Her torn blanket, the bruises mottling her arms, the hollow stare her body, told the story no words could. That one sentence hung in the hot air like smoke refusing to clear. Elias stood frozen for a long moment. He had seen battlefields during the Apache Wars, seen men gutted in saloon brawls, seen what people were capable of when darkness reigned, but never not once had he seen a soul so shattered it no longer feared anything. He did ask who hurt her. He did ask what was done. Questions didn't matter. Instead, he shrugged off his duster coat and laid it gently over her. Then, without speaking, he bent down and lifted her into his arms, as though she weighed nothing more than a sack of grain, not because of chivalry, not even pity, but because in that moment there was nothing else a decent man could do. She didn't fight him, didn't even shift. She simply let her head rest against his chest as if she'd been waiting for someone to tell her it was all right to stop running. And there, under that twisted pinon, with the desert sun beating mercilessly on them, both, a man who thought he'd lost everything met someone who had even less. He did know her name, did know her history, but he knew this, whatever hell she had crawled from, she would go back alone. The ride back to his ranch was long, rough, and eerily quiet. Elias said nothing. The girl later he'd learn her name was Mara just leaned against him in the saddle. Her eyes stayed closed most of the way, her body trembling every so often like her nerves still hadn't. T realized she was safe. Elias, his homestead sat tucked behind a ridge of red rock hills, far from town. A place made for a man who preferred solitude. Weather-beaten boards creaked in the wind. The corral leaned, fences sagged. No neighbors to pry, no busybodies to whisper, just silence and the ghosts of his past. He laid Mara on the old cot inside his cabin, brought in warm water from the kettle, placed a faded calico dress, once belonging to his late wife, on the table. Then he stepped out to the porch without a word. He lit a roll of tobacco, sat heavy on the step, and let the desert night wash over him. He half expected her to bolt or to break down, screaming. But she did. By the next morning he found her not in the cot, but in the barn. She sat in the hay, clutching a sack of feed against her chest like it was the last soft thing in the world. When he offered a tin of beans and cornbread, she accepted but ate slow, cautious like someone who'd been taught food wants to be trusted. Later that day, her first request came, a simple one. Do you have a comb? Elias handed her one. He watched silently as she dragged it through the snarls, pulling out knots and blood clots with quiet determination. At last she asked, barely above a whisper, why did you touch me? Elias, his jaw tightened, he stared at her for a long stretch before answering. Because no man ought to. Her lip quivered, though she forced back tears. She did cry not yet, but in that small moment, some invisible weight shifted. That night she did stay in the barn. She curled by the fire inside the cabin, under a wool blanket. Elias kept his distance, sitting outside beneath the stars, listening to coyotes in the distance. For the first time in a long while, the cabin did feel empty. Days passed. Elias mended fences, hauled water, chopped wood. Mara kept near but never underfoot. She began brushing her hair daily. She ate without hesitation now. She still spoke little, but the silence was no longer heavy with fear. But peace in the desert never lasts. On the fourth morning, Elias saddled up. Heading into Silverton, he said flatly, "Need coffee, nails, medicine?" Mara did reply. But when he turned back, she was already slipping her feet into a worn pair of boots by the door. He let her ride. Silverton was small, but small towns carried big mouths. They moved quietly through the general store, collected supplies. Mara kept close behind Elias, eyes lowered. But as they stepped onto the porch, a voice cut through the dust. Well, look what the wind blew in. A broad man leaned against a hitch rail, red-faced and stinking of whiskey, though it was barely noon. His smile was cruel. Mara froze at the sound. The man staggered forward. "Did tell you, did she? We had ourselves an arrangement. Pretty little thing ran off before payday." Elias didn't ask for proof. Didn't he ask what kind of arrangement? He simply stepped forward and swung. The man hit the dirt, blood streaking from his mouth, yet still grinning through broken teeth. "You just met enemies, Merce. My brother runs this territory. You think you're a hero? You'll both be bones in the sand before the week s out." Elias's voice came low, steady. "She ain't yours." And with that, he and Mara mounted up and rode out. But the threat clung to them like smoke. That night, Mara's hands shook by the fire. Elias poured her a drink, then one for himself. "It's coming, isn't it?" she whispered. He nodded once. "Yeah, it's coming." They didn't wait. That very night, Elias packed 2 bedrolls, dried meat, ammunition, and water. Mara did ask where they were going. She simply helped load the horses. They left the cabin as it was. No goodbye, no looking back. The mountains to the north offered only hardship-thin trails, wolves, freezing nights, but it was better than waiting to be hunted. By the third day, Elias spotted tracks, too neat for travelers, too deliberate for ranch hands. They were being followed, 2 men, maybe 3. Elias knew the land better than most. He set snares, guided them through dry gullies, slept with his rifle across his knees. Mara copied his movements, learned his rhythm. Fear no longer ruled her. It had hardened into something sharper. On the 4th night, a snare caught one of their pursuers. The man screamed when his legs snapped, echoing across the canyon. Elias dragged him into the brush and asked only one question: "Who sent you?" The man laughed through blood. "You'll see." She saw things she was meant to see, things that weren't supposed to leave that house. By the next night, gunfire cracked through the dark. Bullets bit stone but missed flesh. Elias knew the end was near. Before dawn it was settled. Silent war in the rocks, one man against shadows. When smoke cleared, Elias stood, blood on his sleeve, lungs burning. Mara stared at him, torn between horror and awe. You killed for me." Elias wiped his mouth, gave a single nod. "I live for you first." Weeks passed. Up on Hollow Ridge, Elias built a new cabin from logs and scavenged board. No paint, no porch, but it stood. Mara helped hauling, cooking, learning the rhythm of quiet survival. One evening, as the sun sank in a blaze of copper, Mara spoke. "That girl under the piñon, she's gone." Elias stared into the fire. After a long pause, he answered, "Then I am glad, because I got to meet the woman who rose in her place." No grand speeches, no embraces, just a nod, a faint smile. 2 scarred souls sitting side by side in the light of a fire, no longer alone. They never returned to town, never explained. Sometimes the world does deserve your story. Sometimes survival is enough. And maybe that's the story, because for every man who turns his back on what is right, there's still another who knows when to act. And for every woman broken by cruelty, there remains a chance, a thin sliver of sky to begin again. So, if you've listened this far, ask yourself, if you had found her that day, what would you have done? Would you have walked on? Or stepped forward even if no one else ever knew? If this story stirred something in you, give it a like. And if you want more stories that remind you who we're supposed to be, hit that subscribe button. 'Cause out here in the wild, good men still ride. And some stories like this one deserve to be remembered.